There we go. You're on, Lee.
Hi, we're the Guerrilla Lit Reading Series. I want to thank everybody to signing in for this special mid-month edition. This was originally our March event. Obviously, we know why that was not happening. But Dixon Place has been amazing, where we normally host our reading series, and we rescheduled it now, so that's even better. Okay, now I have to read this thing. Hold on. Dixon Place programs are generously supported by the Axe Houghton Foundation and the NYC Department of Cultural Affairs. We'd be so grateful if you consider making a donation, right where you can click that, to keep the literary fires burning at Dixon Place. The full link is in the chat section, so please click there if you want to donate to Dixon Place. We have 3 great readers for you tonight. Our first reader is Suzanne Dottino. Suzanne Dottino is a writer of fiction and plays. Her latest story, Angel of Mercy, appears in the current issue of the Bellevue Literary Review and has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize. She teaches literature at BMCC. Oh, I used to work there. I didn't know that. She's the editor of the online literary journal KGB Bartlett. Please give a warm welcome to Suzanne.
Hi. Thank you everybody for coming tonight. Thank you, Marco and Lee at Guerrilla Lit, for inviting me, and for Dixon Place for putting this whole thing together. And thank you, John. I'm really excited and honored to be reading with you guys. Okay, so tonight I'm going to be reading the first 12 minutes from Angel of Mercy, and this appeared in the latest issue of Bellevue Literary Review, and if you want to hear the end of the story, it's also available on my website. Angel of Mercy. Just as the last light disappears into the horizon and the rest of the city of Seattle is preparing to make dinner, I am waked up. I work at a hospital. I am a nurse. I chose this shift because my urges at this time of day are absolutely calm and in a normal state. I leave my apartment in enough time to make up for the detour. I drive 10 miles out of my way to avoid the Loving Hands Child Care Center on Abbott and Spruce. Then I drive 4 miles south so I don't have to bright horizon on West Hyde and 3rd. Finally, and this one is the hardest, I drive south to Yesler Avenue, sitting in traffic, risking being late to work to avoid the Child Time Nursery on North Bank and Fort Sheldon Boulevard. Preemies are my weakness. Sure, the detours eat time and gas, but it's part of my self-prescribed rehabilitation, and I get to see parts of Seattle I've never seen before. Like Rome, Seattle also claims to have been built on 7 magnificent hills, 4 of which I encounter on my drive to work. The views are beyond redemption. Don't let people steer you away from Seattle because of its weather. During my drive, I call Kendra to get her report on the patients on the 9th floor, and then, like passing a baton, she'll pass them on to me. I'll go from room to room in my white polyester uniform and signature red Crocs, examining the patient's vitals and administering medication as needed. I've even held down a patient who suddenly had a seizure. I have surprisingly strong arms for someone with such a petite frame. I catch myself yawning while on my rounds. The couple that lives below me in the apartment complex kept me up last night with their arguing. I'm relying on the soothing ritual of preparing my herbal tea to center me. Herbal teas calm my mind, relax my body, and help me get agitation free. The only jolt I get these days is when I mistakenly get off in the neonatal intensive care unit on the 11th floor. That's where the preemies are. It is a dimly lit floor, very intimate, yet screaming brightly with pain. I've had my eye on one in particular to save. Left to myself, I'd save them all. Getting into the elevator and pressing the 11th floor button, then cruising the pods of children on that godforsaken floor has happened once or twice by accident. Glad to report that beyond looking, I haven't truly acted out while there. Not at this hospital. After I make my rounds, I tell Ben, 34, married, and childless at this point anyway, that I'm going on a break. I get my large box of wooden teas, a 36-ounce bottle of Evian, and my mug from my locker and get into the elevator. My palms sweat. Instead of sliding over the 11th floor button to push 12, which is where the break room is, my hand hovers over 11. Don't you dare push that button. Be wise. Give it more time. You never went to college, much less nursing school, but you work here. You're not dumb. Use your brain. You're newish. Blend in. Don't be so selfish. Show some self-control. Don't do anything without a plan B. Don't do it. Don't. I'm out of self-talk to talk myself out of pressing the 11th floor button, because if I don't, who will? Today, I'm going all out. I'm mixing leaves from pomegranate, Swedish berries, lemon chamomile, and ginseng peppermint into one glorious mug. The shame is that I have to steep my tea in the microwave. It changes not only the experience, but also, very slightly, most people don't even notice this, but I do, the taste. This pantry doesn't have a stove, and short of bringing the butane stove I take with me on my camping trips, it has to do. I don't trust the water from the tap, and I don't trust the cups in this pantry. Germs travel like neutrinos. Hospitals are the least sanitary places in the world. No one is safe. A death rattle, in case someone doesn't know what that is a gurgling sound in a dying person's throat. It is similar to a sound a baby rattle makes when it is shaken. These sounds merge the line between new life and death. Is someone dying, or is someone entertaining a baby? Who can tell? They both sound the same. You could also say the circle of life begins and ends with a rattle. Though in my experience, when a baby dies, within my hands at least, it sounds distinctly like a gulp, a death gulp. But I'm the only one who calls it that. The families are in shock. So many tears, cry me a river. The doctors are called into question. The nurses are called into question. Security cameras? Who was in charge? How could this have happened? The media devours it. What no one stops to consider is, maybe the baby is better off. A baby doesn't have the ability to be its own advocate. Someone needs to take responsibility and do what is right for the child. The child can't be to blame for its life. It wasn't his or her choice to be born. Rape is no way to enter this world. And yet women are raped by their husbands, by strangers, or family members on a daily basis. And who wants that child born from rape? No one. Do we think that child wants to be alive in the world surrounded by all that hate, shame, and secrecy? No. And yet we all selfishly assume they do. Preemies speak with their eyes. They tell the world, I don't want to be here. We must honor that request with swift, ultimate action. Walking the hospital's corridors in my Crocs, absorbing its rank smells, hearing its pulse oximeters, I'm subjected to external stimuli that, if not monitored, increases my susceptibility. Don't need to stir the excitement pot by throwing in high-octane caffeinated drinks, espresso shots, chocolate, and what have you. I have to keep my emotional motor running on neutral so I don't act out. At the end of the day, though, the most truly effective thing I can do for myself is to keep myself busy with unimportant nonsense and constantly remind myself that eventually I'll be dead. It works. I'm so untriggered these days that the only thing that keeps me up at night are those white plastic Purell hand sanitizer contraptions that are placed literally every 10 feet in the hospital. The white dollop of antibacterial foam that it dispenses doesn't actually, not sufficiently anyway, get rid of germs. But if we don't use them before and after a visit to a patient's room, we will get written up by other staff members and even, I've been told, the patients, as if they need more to complain about. But enough infractions could lead to getting fired, and worse, would signal more about me than I care to be known. Them the rules, though, I have to obey. I didn't make them up. Rules raise my blood pressure. Rules make me anxious. Rules agitate me. In my entire 48 years, not a day goes by that I don't curse at least one rule. But putting things that agitate me into a larger context is everything. So I tell myself, Hand sanitizer equals first world problem. Just put your damn hand under the fucking Purell machine every time you enter and leave a room. As the campaign says, just do it. 99% of the time, I do. The passing of time in a hospital, much like having to spend the night in an airport or even playing the slots on a gambling floor in Las Vegas or Atlantic City, has a surreal quality to it. The lack of fresh air, clocks, and windows to tell what time of day it is or what the weather is makes you feel like you're floating in a submarine, ungrounded, no sea legs, a false framework to define time. So much so that before I know it, it's already 6 a.m. My 12-hour shift is flung by. I check in with myself. I am sufficiently tired considering how many hours I just put in, and now it is time for me to get an equal amount of sufficient sleep. It's been an uneventful day, no outbreaks, and gratefully 0 urges. I review my chart so I can give a report to Annika, the nurse who will, like me, like the passing of a baton, will be taking over for me. I go to my locker and get my raincoat, keys, and box of teas, and I chart my drive home. I live in the new condo complex on Bilson. 1 bedroom, living room, bathroom, a walk-in closet painted in pale pink in memory of baby Eva, the first babies that I saved. The inside of my apartment is decorated in neutral tones, no bright colors, patterned pillows, or elaborately stitched carpeting. It's taken years and mistakes to figure out what does and does not agitate me. The word these days actually is trigger, but I prefer agitate. It sounds less violent. With my raincoat in hand, I walk to the break room to sign out for my shift. Vince, a good-looking Filipino, father of twin girls, God help them all, is assisting patient number 24, a middle-aged woman just out of back surgery, across the hallway to her room. Hey, he says as I pass by. Hi, Vince, I say. Look, can you do me a favor? Our babysitter flunked out on us. Can you take my shift today? I recall how great it feels to see the extra zeros in my paycheck. I remind myself that I am feeling so urge-free today, so I say yes. I say yes because being asked to take someone's shift doesn't come up very often. I say yes because I recall how actually great it feels to push or not push the 11th floor button while in the elevator. I say yes because there are those out there still sick and suffering that I need to save. Through my elation or confusion, I hear as if from a great distance, him saying, I owe you big time. I walk back to my locker to put my coat away. Well, this day has certainly turned out different. I mean, I had a plan. A solid plan to drive home after my shift, unpack a box or two, hang a painting, make tea and go to sleep. Then I got this invitation from Vince to work his shift, and I said yes. So let me get this straight. I disrupted all my other plans. I disregarded my fatigue, and I said yes. Taking on an additional 12 hours puts me at risk. The combination of lack of sleep, depletion of energy, dehydration, and too much fluorescent lighting after another consecutive 12 hours of working in a hospital would turn anyone, not just me, into a monster. Monster is the word given to humans who do certain acts that other humans can't imagine a human being capable of doing. The monster sits silently within us, waiting to be called. And if you live long enough, things in life build to a point where the monster doesn't wait anymore. It just acts.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. So I want to say we're going to also be having a Q&A with all of our authors. And if you have any questions, you can leave them in the chat. And at the end of all 3 of them, we'll go through the Q&A. Our next reader coming up is, let's see the screen. What? Wait, there it is. John Domini. John Domini's latest book, The Color Inside a Melon. Blurbs came from Salman Rushdie and Marlon James, and the Washington Post praised it as sage, spry, and especially well-turned. He has 3 earlier novels and 3 story collections. The millions called his work a new shriek for a new century. Other books include selections of criticism and poetry. He's published fiction in the Paris Review and Ploughshares, nonfiction in GQ and the New York Times, and won a poetry prize from Meridian. Grants include a fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts. Domini has taught at Harvard and elsewhere and makes his home in Des Moines, Iowa. Please give a warm welcome for John.
Yay.
Thank you. Suzanne, I was trying to send you a congratulations note there. There, I've sent it. Congratulations. And I'm very happy to be here. Marco or somebody, for what it's worth, I'm not seeing my face on the screen. And I don't think, I don't need to, but I'm just one of the faces at the top, if that makes a difference. We have, I have out of color a few options for what to read, but when I discovered that Heather Woodbury was here, a renowned performance artist, Heather, you want to catch her show Whatever if you can, I thought I better read a piece about a performance artist. Now, the performance artist is not the center of this novel. The protagonist is a guy named Risto, who runs an art gallery in Naples, Italy. Risto is an unusual man, a Somali refugee who has managed to carve out a life in Italy, and he runs his own art gallery now. He even has a wife of Italian descent, that is a white wife, and children. Therefore, he has become a citizen. Yet a murder among the illegal aliens in town, the clandestini, a murder of another African has triggered something in him. He's gotten involved in this murder. He has even he has managed to get the police to pay attention to it. And now there has been a second murder, and Risto has been told by the police, you got to get out of town. You're too close to this, you need to get out of town. Now, of course, this is summer in Italy, beginning of August in Italy, and wives and children go out of the city, they go down the coast to another town, catch a train, remember that. But Risto, as this chapter about his getaway, Risto, the art gallerist who works with a very sophisticated crowd, Risto finds himself on the island ferry, the upper deck. He had a bench to himself. It was therapy, alone in a breeze full of salt and fermentation. For this trip, he preferred the slow boat, the fat old traghetto, the low-slung hydrofoils made for a shorter journey, but they didn't have the deck space. If you did find a seat outside, you risked getting your phone doused by spray. The gallery owner intended to use his phone. The calls, just 2, shouldn't be hard on him, but till now, he'd put them off. They hadn't seemed reason enough to stop moving. He'd skipped swinging by the apartment too, driven to get some distance, some perspective. At his back, besides, he had the homicide detective with some powerful dreams of his own going on about this case. Maybe the officer would get a transfer to Melon. And the last thing he wanted was some hyperactive Nero, black man, Nero, in the way. But then Risto himself was sick of his hyperactivity. The getaway mattered more than a change of shirt and underwear. So topside, on a ferry, For some reason, you caught the communications boomerang better than on a bench. I'm sorry, better than on a beach. He's sitting on a bench, but better than on a beach. And you probably noticed this yourselves with cell phones. A beach can be a problem. Risto got a connection clear as a bell on his first call, the one out to the island. In no time, he confirmed that he was welcome and therefore in his right mind. His man on Capri remained the same as ever, sharing the house with a lady friend. She wasn't one of those who preferred to go unseen either. And for Risto, they would pull together a party. At this, the man who just invited himself over had no choice but to sound pleased. And maybe he was anyway. Maybe island-style debauchery, more understated than the city version, would be good for him. After all, the ride across the Gulf looked like 45 minutes of solo meditation. Before the second call, he tried to force down one of the shipboard panini. Bad idea. The sandwich might have dated back to the Crusaders, the marauding knights like those who put up the Castel dell'Ovo, the hulking waterfront keep. You got a great view as the ferry pulled away from the city. And come to think, that castle had a lot in common with Risto's attempt at lunch. It had a color you might call desiccated bread, if not ham past expiration. Worse, the humpbacked medieval warren was a drain on the city. Every administration tried out something new. Last year, an arts venue. This summer, a prison. Dell'Ovo had been the only place the police could find for locking away some immigrant protester. Anyway, somewhere amid Dell'Ovo's decaying brick, undoubtedly there lay the fossilized remains of the other panini put together the same day as this one. Per carità, the Crusaders had no idea about food to begin with. What did they eat, those blonde demons? Bones and mead? They'd been boat people, pirates, yet they'd have the nerve to claim Naples as northern and white. Risto fought down a couple of bites and half an orangina. The next call was to Paola, his wife. And once he'd given up on the panino, he needed only a moment more, a scroll through his photos, when a stranger took him by surprise, an African woman sliding in beside him. She had no need for Black folks' radar to see she wasn't interrupting. She noticed the photos too, the kids mostly, grinning hugely. With their complexions, the smile could have been a halo slid down to the middle of the face. The woman nodded and cooed, "Aren't you the lucky father?" Her Italian, husky, passable, could have come from half a dozen countries on the other side of the Mediterranean. Why, they're dolls. They're just perfect dolls. Risto didn't so much as raise his eyes, but she kept on. You ought to thank your lucky stars. One day soon, you mark my words, those two will make you rich. Maybe she did have some radar after all. This is something Risto's told himself. It's a joke between his wife and he. His kids are going to make them rich. Those two will make millions for you in the fashion magazines. Dubious as Risto found the compliments, he made a note to share them with Paola. He hid behind his Arangina and took in the uninvited guest. A woman no longer young, but slender and flexible and fresh from a shower. Her dress was a wraparound, its colors a match for one of his own splashy shirts. Okay, benefit of the doubt. The fashion magazines, he said. Oh, sir, you must have noticed. They're all the rage these days. Mulattoes. Wherever she'd gotten the dress, she'd been careful to choose a forgiving fit. Her chest was so flat that you thought of drought in the Sudan. The woman's hair, though, that was a showpiece, a sunset gold page boy that fell across one eye. With a wig like that, her actual hair must be cropped as close as a man's. Risto thumbed through another few shots. Efta came up, blowing a kiss goodbye. Next was Juicy, the performance artist, striking a pose, of course. My. Even at phone size, Juicy looked like a star, Jamie Foxx of the Fleas. One after another, just look, such a handsome array of colored folk. With a woman like this around, who needed a sandwich? She generated such energy, she had Risto noticing something new about his own photos. Other than Paola, he didn't have any white folks. He even left out some of his clients. Oh la la, the stranger continued. Comme ce sont beaux, les Africains comme ça, le sang mixte. The language was the least of what had changed. The voice had dropped a good octave. Small wonder Benetton can't get enough of them, the tawny pelts, united colors. Risto almost lost hold of his soda. The ads, Benetton, they're the opposite of the old story. Where's it from, that story, The 1001 Nights? Or was it Kipling's Hindu act? Just so. The one about the leopard that can't change its spots. Why, that's the opposite of what these ads are selling. They're telling you, you wear our clothes and you're pretty as we are, in whatever color you'd care to become. The right clothes and scrub-a-dub-dub. Who says you're just an old jungle cat? Risto had the hiccups. Juicy. The performer tossed back his hair. A few colored sticks, an ointment or two, and he had a whole new face. When he laughed, he sounded a dozen years Risto's junior. So fetching a frock, he said, you understand? I simply had to. You of all people, patron of the arts, Aristofano, philosopher of happiness, you know I had to try. You had to try the frock? Oh, la, have you forgotten? I'm a featured performer with the Expo in Città. Risto, the event just begs for something fresh, n'est-ce pas? One can't restore the city's cultural credibility in the sort of drab threads you'd see on Madame Mayor. Juicy would have 3/4 of an hour on the stage alongside the Galleria downtown. The booking loomed large for him, naturally, a refugee song and dance man who would never play the opera. Nonetheless, the Expo in Città offered a stage, sanctioned by the city. It was a show that ought to lead to better, and why not better legal standing as well? Was that so inconceivable? Up in Rome this summer, there'd been talk of a saner immigration policy. And look at that, a wild notion brought to mind by seeing his friend in drag. Look what the performance artist had him thinking. Risto knew himself, his densely populated head. These last days, he'd had worse of a crowd than usual up there. Yet here, this Pulcinello out of Ethiopia, a man who took fiendish glee at warping the squares, he'd teased out stranger thoughts. He'd made his fairy audience aware of how, from time to time in this country, the earth could move. Up in Rome, they were talking. Juicy, he said. You're amazing. Dear boy, frankly, you have no idea. That'll do for now. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Thank you so much, John.
Everybody, thank you.
Thanks so much, John. For all of our readers too, if you went into the chat, there's also links to buy their books or to buy the magazine where Suzanne's story is. Our last reader of the night is Joseph Salvatore. He is the author of the story collection To Assume a Pleasing Shape and the co-author of the college textbook Understanding English Grammar. He is books editor at the Brooklyn Rail and a frequent contributor to the New York Times Sunday Book Review. His fiction has appeared in, among other places, The Collagist, Dossier, Epiphany, New York Tyrant, and Open City. His criticism has appeared in the Los Angeles Times, Rain Taxi, the Routledge International Encyclopedia of Queer Literature, Angels of the Americlypse, an anthology in New Latin writing, The Believer Lager, and elsewhere. He's an associate professor of writing at the New School in New York City, where he received the University Distinguished Teaching Award, and was the founding editor of the literary journal Lit. He lives in Queens. Please give a welcome to Joseph.
Thank you very much. Hey, Marco, thank you so much for this invitation. I was really looking forward to being at Dixon Place, but this is just as good. I'm seeing some really friendly faces here. Kevin Carey just popped on. I see him. Hey, Kevin, long time no see. Lee, thank you. Everybody involved in this, thanks so much. And friends that are here, thank you for coming. I'm going to read so I have a story coming out in a wonderful anthology that I'm going to pop the link up to right here in the chats. It's called Tiny Nightmares, very short tales of terror or horror. And some great writers. It's sort of an invitation to literary writers to try their hand at some genre work, but in general, it's just a bunch of writers doing some horror work, and I'm delighted and honored to be in there. It's coming out on Halloween, but the way everything is going, I figure every little book can use a push, so I thought I'd promote it a little bit here and read a piece from it now. Get it on everybody's radar if you're looking for something to entertain yourself. This is it. So I'm going to read a piece from it, my story actually. It's quite short. I also want to, before I do that, just thank the editors of Tiny Nightmares, Lincoln Michelle and Najili Nieto, for this wonderful anthology. The story I'm going to read is called Downpour. I've never read it aloud before, so I'm going to take it a little slow. It's called Downpour. The rat had been trapped on the subway platform for a half hour before Rose lugged the dripping baby stroller down the stairs to the swamp of bodies waiting in the humidity for the L train to Manhattan. The sudden July downpour brought even more riders than usual off Bedford Avenue and down to the trains. And when Rose finally got to the bottom of the stairs, gently lowering the stroller to the platform, Emma was, miraculously, still asleep. Rose put the brake on the carriage and blew her damp bangs from her face. The heat was overwhelming. She thought about opening the plastic rain cover to give Emma a little air, but when she saw her 4-month-old sleeping face, she decided to keep her inside her plastic bubble, safe and sound. Rose turned then to see a swath split the dense crowd, parting them like a zipper. Everyone jumping and lifting their legs and grabbing hold of other people in a frenzy. The woman in front of Emma's stroller screamed, "Huge fucking rat." Rose saw the rat, almost as big as a cat, dart under an empty bench and then reemerge on the other side and scurry under a trash barrel, its long gray tail twitching like a dying worm. A white girl with dreadlocks and designer bell-bottoms screeched and jumped up on the bench, clutching her backpack to her chest and whining to her friends, still standing around her. Someone called for help, at which point, Deus ex machina, a cleaner in dark blue subway overalls came running down the stairs with a broom the size of a hammerhead shark, with bristles as big as chopsticks. He silently moved into the crowd, laser focused on finding the rat. He held the broom up with 2 hands and stealthily approached the trash barrel as everyone moved back, crowding Rose and Emma's stroller closer to the edge of the crowded platform. The cleaner crept toward the barrel with the broom raised like a spear. The rat's tail disappeared under the barrel and everyone let go a collective groan. The man released the broom with a sudden fierce snap, throwing it like someone trying to spear a buffalo. When the broom stopped, the rat rolled out from under the bristles, not dead, but moving much more slowly than it had been for the last half hour. Some of the crowd whooped and others gasped. The man grabbed the handle and lifted the broom slowly. The rat rolled over quickly and people began to move back again, this time forcing the stroller's handle into Rose's belly, backing her again closer to the edge of the platform where she could see the red light of a subway train growing larger inside the tunnel. She felt the breeze of its approach cool her face. And she swung the stroller out and away from the edge, but the rat leaped up. The crowd surged back again, and the man plunged the broom at it once more, not throwing it this time, but stabbing it in quick blows, stunning the rat, now lying flat on its belly, a rear leg sticking out at an angle impossible to believe didn't indicate a break. Someone shouted then for the man to stop, to leave it alone now. Rose joined the group and yelled for the man to sweep the poor thing onto the tracks for Christ's sake. But her voice was drowned out by the roar of the arriving train. As the doors opened, Rose gently tilted the stroller back over the lip of the car's floor and pushed across to the other side, nestling it tight between the doors and the blue seat next to it. She used her foot to kick off the brake, leaned against the doors and watched the man sweeping the dazed rat toward the platform's edge, pushing it hard and fast, the fat rat rolling among the bristles. Whether he heard Rose or not, she thought he was doing just as she'd suggested. It was then the rat leaped up, as if it had been playing possum, electrified and wild, running between legs and luggage and jumping between the subway doors just as they were closing, a dark blur flying at knee level across the car. Rose looked down just in time to see the rat's tail disappear under the rain cover of the stroller, a dark, fat shadow moving up and over Emma's body toward her face, a wild spray of red splashing across the plastic bubble, Emma's tiny pink socked foot beginning to kick wildly, and Rose tore into the rain cover but could not puncture it, could not pull it off the stroller's frame. She pitched the whole thing over then on its side and went up under it with hands and head disappearing in the same spot the tail had disappeared moments ago. Under the cover, it was hot and wet, so much hotter and wetter than the Brooklyn afternoon out of which she and Emma had just stepped in search of some relief. The end. Thank you. Just a light, happy little tale to get through the pandemic.
Thank you, Joseph. I want to thank all of our readers, Joseph, John, and Suzanne. So we're going to go to the Q&A portion of this. Let me see all the great questions that people have asked. Okay, here's one from Christopher Gaddis to Suzanne. He would be interested if the original draft of your story has been slightly updated to fit our recent times, or was it in your original final draft?
No, it was not. It was slightly edited for this reading, but just not, it wasn't updated at all with the pandemic in mind at all.
What kind of research did you do for it in terms of at hospitals in general?
Very little. I thought the least I know, the better. Just very little about it.
I believed it completely, so it seemed like there was a lot done, yeah.
Nurses' schedules was a big one. Just getting and how nurses stories about nurses, their schedules, that seemed to be a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Tell a lot about what they did by their schedules. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, we have. Let me see another one. This is also from Christopher Gaddis to John. John, what inspired the location and your characters? John, turn on your unmute.
And I'm in the process of asking Joe about his story. And I am going to send that, and then I am going to send that. Okay. All right. I happen to know there's another question coming, but sure, I'll just say briefly that, there's, and of course, there's a lot to say here, but my father came from Naples, grew to adulthood in Naples, had a whole life over in Naples before he met a woman from New York and moved to the States. That is, he moved after the war when we still welcomed immigrants. And I remained in touch with the people over there in Naples. I'm the most Italian of my family somehow, after my father, of course. And I spent a lot of time over there, and at a crucial period in midlife when, the world had defeated me, when you've lost everything. I went to Naples. I lived there a while. I lived with family. I got to know the crises going on, and it is a fascinating place. Again, there's a whole book to be written there, and I've written one, now a memoir. But, I guess the central irony, Naples is one of the cities that has been longest continuously inhabited on Earth. There's a street there, Spaccanapoli. It may be the single street that's been around the longest in the same place, continuously used in the world. And yet it is rife with very, very contemporary problems, in particular the immigrant problem. They don't know what to do with all these Africans coming in. That's the nutshell. Does that do it for you, Chris?
Yes, it does.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Chris.
John, there's another question for you as well. This is from Robin Tisman. What considerations went into your decision to make Risto an art gallerist? From her perspective, it seems like an ideal vehicle with which to examine sociological class structures, but she's curious to hear your process and perspectives.
Thank you very much. Hey, thanks to you again, too, Lee. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Appreciate all this effort. And I hope I can get back to the fundraiser site when all this is over. I hope it doesn't close too quickly for me to get there. But okay, Robin. Naples is, in part because of those elements I was just talking to, it is a place of real artistic ferment. And for a while, around in the 20-aughts, for a while it was actually touted as the next great center of contemporary art. There was an article in the New York Times magazine, etc. So there is the reality of the arts being constantly in process there, and it's much more an art of the streets. It would be more like New York in the 70s, an art of the streets. There's a tremendous graffiti scene there, and of course the performance artists. That's a real career path there, to be a performance artist, somebody who basically gets up and tells jokes and does some fancy physical work, and that's your evening, is watching this person carry on. So there was the reality, and I was interested in that. You know, I'm kind of an arts guy. I was drawn to that. But then the other thing that is essential for this book, at least, is that the arts is always one of the few venues where a marginal class, an outsider group, can get ahead. Consider the African Americans in our country. You know, that's one of those areas where if you're sharp enough, if you please a couple of the right people, you can move up. And that certainly was obvious to me. I too met Africans who were making a living in film or in the visual arts. That Risto runs the place, is the gallerist. Well, that's actually a plot issue that comes out. But in order to do that, in order to own property, he needed some helping hand. And I guess I should leave it at that. He found a helping hand, but in Naples, those hands are always a bit dirty. Hope that helps.
We have two questions for Joe. Joe, this is from John. Please talk about where you ended in terms of reading your story. He says the cutoff was perfect. So if you could talk.
Yeah. John and others, as writers, I feel I'm often at my best when there's a constraint on the writing, some kind of formal constraint. So for instance, when I cover books for the New York Times, they are hard about their word count, and I usually overwrite. I overwrite, to find my way into the material, but by the time I have to make that word count, it somehow becomes better because of the forced cutting. And so too here with the story, there was a minimum number of words that I was supposed to meet, and that kind of set the frame for the story for me. But this past semester in my MFA class, I was teaching some stories from Rod Serling's book, The Twilight Zone, which was this weird old paperback I found years and years ago. And some of them were taken straight from the scripts, but he wrote them in prose. And I was interested in the way he was ending, to see in prose the way these stories come to an end. And having been raised on the sort of dead-end minimalism of Carver and and Beatty and stuff, I was always interested in how you could leave the story feeling as though it's actually, as they say, opening out, as opposed to the curtain closing, but rather to feel that you just opened out. There's an ending to Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been by Joyce Carol Oates. And that too just leaves you don't really know, but you kind of know what's going to happen after that. Nothing good. And I think that was the impulse on my part, to leave it where nothing good is going to happen, and sort of in some kind of classical sense, not really show too much of the horror.
The second question for you is from Minerva Martinez. And she asks, was it a particular hot and terrible subway experience that inspired your story? What was the inspiration for it? And she also thinks she knows the rat. It also made me very I can't believe how much I would want to be on like a hot, crowded subway in normal times right now. Like that is what I'd be dreaming about.
Yeah, I had to go into the city. I had to go into the city recently to get some stuff out of my office. That they opened the new school for like a couple hours on one day, and I tell you, it may have been my imagination, but those rats were huge. It was as if, I don't know, they were everywhere. But okay, so that actually happened to me. What happened was I had come down, and there was a rat that was not going away, kind of like the shark in Jaws. And a big guy with a big broom was chasing it, pounding at it, and the thing wasn't dying. It was a real fight, and it seemed kind of Moby Dickish, And then all of a sudden, the rat, the broom got the better of the rat, and the rat was stunned. It was completely hurt, and this guy kept poking at it and hitting it and kind of taking some pleasure in it. And at that point, and I'd been the one I was ready to see the rat go away. And then after a while, I started to feel kind of bad for the rat. You didn't need to go at it any further. And but I didn't have the moral courage to say, stop it. So in the story, I wanted to explore that a little bit. And that's that sense of that change in my mind about a rat never left me. And it came out in this little story.
So this is a question for all the readers, or really anybody who wants to answer. This is from JT Price to everyone, who asks, child baby endangerment seems to be a theme for tonight. What is it about having dependents that haunts a writer? And in some way, does writing itself count as a dependent? Which I think is a very good question.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well,
who wants it?
I'll start by saying my child isn't so much endangered, 2 children, as being ignored by Risto in his present frenzied state. And in fact, that scene gets into that. Juicy is more than smart enough to know that his friend's wife and children are down south of town, not out on the island. What are you doing here? We're both in the same boat, he said. But I would hope that one of the things Risto is working through is the question of his commitment to his new life, which includes his new family. Somebody else?
Anybody else?
Suzanne?
Yeah, I was thinking about child endangerment. I was really focused on creating a character or normalizing a character who does despicable things. And then the most despicable thing would be to harm a child. So in that sense, I was thinking about child endangerment. That's how it was the worst thing anyone could do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the cliche about writing what you fear the most is true. And certainly, after having kids, it's beyond expressing how much I would be destroyed if something ever happened to them, and how fiercely I just am wired to protect them. But exploring it in writing, I think, is the writer's pleasure. So when I was writing this, I had just finished Pet Sematary, and that's the granddaddy of all bad things happening to your kids stories. So that was kind of in my mind. But I was also interested in how a lot of those BBC shows that I've been devouring often have a child kind of get hurt or get murdered or something. And though it's kind of a formula, it's almost like very difficult to resist the temptation because it's such a powerful anxiety, I think. But yeah, your other point is one that David Foster Wallace talks about and others, which is that the writing, the draft itself is a baby, and that we are always anxious about sending it out into the world without its proper buttons all done up right and its face cleaned. So yeah, it is definitely a child, the writing piece, yeah. In fact, the thing I read to you tonight was a revision of that thing that's going to be in the final anthology. I couldn't help but change a few words. So it was like cleaning a little bit of the smudge off the cheek of the baby.
There's also Edgar Allan Poe's The Imp of the Perverse, which is about once you think that horrific thought, it comes true, which seems to be very apparent in Suzanne's and Joseph's piece, but also it's sort of there in yours as well, John, because why is Risto obsessed with this murder? That's a sort of perverse, that's a perversity, isn't it? Or it takes him somewhere that he doesn't expect to go.
I'm happy to answer. Some of the reasons why Risto is drawn into this particular case are obvious, and I didn't want too needed connection, like he came from the next town over, or he was a member of Risto's clan. I didn't want that. And what I wanted, though, was something that triggers a kind of midlife frenzy. I'm sure it would never happen to anybody here, but you're questioning everything you're about. And it's very important that in Risto's case, he's had to do this since he was 15, that as a refugee, he's cobbling identity together moment to moment. He is the performance artist. And the murder takes him to a reality that about identity, about his place in Italy, that he has to grapple with in order to move to the next point. It's a midlife crisis story in which the man does not buy a red sports car or wake up with a 20-year-old.
John, this is another question for you. It's from Fred Gardaff. I might have mispronounced that. Gardafe. Fred asks, reading excerpts from novels can be like one-night stands. How do you choose a short segment from a longer work to present at readings such as tonight's?
Well, I wouldn't know anything about one-night stands. But I try to pick things that are in. When I actually made the decision, I was down to 2, and I made the decision to go with the second one, which I'd already worked up, and I knew what I needed to do. I'd made cuts for reading. I made the decision to go with that one when I discovered Heather Woodbury was here. I did. But, I'd already made, I'd done the beginning work a long time ago when I first thought, this is a pretty interesting, an interesting and contained episode, and would work well out loud. If I can do the voices, it'll work well out loud. But the classic place to read from a novel, of course, is right from the beginning. And at a number of my readings, I've done that. I've just read from the first pages. But even there, you've got to make some changes. You've got to have some introductions, something. I was going to show you another note, but I guess it's meaningless. the whole idea of giving readings. I guess they started in the 19th century. Is that true? People like Dickens.
No, John Donne, man. John Donne used to give really big readings.
Well, but he was a priest. He was a
no. Before it, Donne used to give sold out readings. No, don't forget, when he became a priest, that's when his poetry became sexualized, and when he was the rake, metaphysicist, that's when it was very spiritual. But no, he
Oh, actually, I had forgotten. That dropped right out of my.
Don't ever.
No, I did not know that. Did not know. So, you're way ahead of me.
No, but my point is readings. Yeah, no, they've been around for a while. Talk to it, John. Talk to it.
It is that all I was going to say was that people like Twain or Dickens, they must have wrestled with the same. Dickens, I know, would perform the whole Christmas Carol, and because that was his biggest hit. And Twain, we know, if you've ever seen Mark Twain Tonight, he would interpolate bits and pieces all in his sort of wonderful raconteur spirit. But both of them had a lot longer than the average reader we have nowadays. You've got to be a Nobel Prize winner or something to get 45 minutes on stage.
Well, lectures in the 19th century were performance art. I mean, they had as many people going to lectures as go to see pop stars now. They were huge.
Yeah. And Nabokov, of course, was a great lecturer. And there's even a movie of one of Nabokov's lectures. But the reading that the artistic product is promoted by readings, and so you've got to have this shorter, punchier thing that you're delivering. I will say that, of course, I've attended long readings. They haven't been Nobel Prize winners. But, they wound up being, like Seamus Heaney. I heard him read for a good hour and a half, and he won the Nobel eventually. And it was a great, great reading. Fred, did I answer your question? I guess so.
Yes, yeah,
He's not even. He doesn't even know I'm alive.
He's here. He's just muted.
Oh, okay.
Are there any last questions for our three great readers? If not, I want to thank everybody for showing up to our Zoom Guerrilla, for the three readers for taking the time out to read as well. Please go on the chat and buy the links of all of their books and works that are available. We will be back in just 2 short weeks on Wednesday, May 27th, with 3 readers. We have Farouk Ahmed, Nicole Mabry, and Peter Klein. So please look out for details. And again, if the link comes back up to support Dixon Place, please throw them some bones and support your arts. And again, thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you.
Good night. Thanks.
Oh, bye, John.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.